The silver ships descended through Earth's blue sky like giant teardrops, their surfaces so smooth they seemed to bend light around them. People in Geneva stopped walking and pointed upward, some taking pictures with their phones, others calling friends to come outside and see. Ambassador Veltar stepped out of the lead ship onto the concrete landing pad. He was tall, maybe 8 feet, with pale blue skin and 4 arms that moved in graceful patterns. His eyes were large and dark, set in a face that looked almost human except for the extra pair of smaller eyes above his eyebrows. Behind him came 6 other aliens, each carrying what looked like glowing tablets. Korean Secretary General Kim Dae-ho waited with his team at the edge of the landing area. He wore his best dark suit and had practiced his diplomatic smile in the mirror that morning. Beside him stood his chief advisor Lee Min-ho, a serious man with thick glasses, and Park So-min, a young woman who spoke 12 languages and carried 3 different recording devices. The translator devices began humming as soon as Veltar approached. His voice came through the speakers in perfect English, though it sounded slightly musical, like someone singing while they talked. "Greetings, people of Earth," Veltar said, spreading all 4 arms wide. "We are the Galactic Trade Consortium, and we bring you wonderful news. Your small world has been chosen to join our great civilization." Kim bowed slightly. The way he had been taught was polite for meeting important visitors. "We are honored by your visit. Please, tell us more about this opportunity." Veltar's smile showed teeth that were too sharp and too white. "Of course you are curious. Your species shows promise, though you are still quite primitive. We have watched you for some time, and we believe you can be useful to us." Lee Min-ho wrote something quickly in his notebook. Park So-min's recording devices kept running silently. "The terms are very generous," Veltar continued, pulling out his glowing tablet. "You will give us 60% of your planet's resources. This includes metals, water, food, and energy sources. We will also need guidance over your governments to help you make better decisions. And finally, 10 million of your people will come work for us on other worlds. Think of it as a wonderful chance to see the galaxy." The 3 humans exchanged quick glances. Kim's diplomatic smile never wavered, but his eyes grew very still. 10 million people? Park So-min asked quietly. "Oh yes, we need workers for our mining colonies and factory worlds. Your people seem strong enough for basic labor. Do not worry, we will take good care of them." Kim folded his hands behind his back, a gesture his wife always said meant he was thinking hard. "This is certainly a significant proposal. Such important decisions require careful thought and discussion with our people." Veltar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, the smaller ones first, then the larger ones. "I think you misunderstand. This is not a discussion. This is us telling you what will happen. We have done this with 847 other worlds. It always works the same way." "And how is that?" Lee Min-ho asked, still writing in his notebook. "We arrive, we explain. The terms and the people agree. Sometimes they ask questions, but they always agree in the end. It is much better than the alternative." "What alternative?" Kim asked, though his voice remained perfectly calm. "Well, if a world refuses to cooperate, we simply take what we need anyway. But that makes much more work for everyone. It is easier when people are reasonable." Park So-min looked up from her recording devices. "And the other worlds you mentioned? They all agreed to these terms?" "Of course they did. Every intelligent species understands that cooperation is better than conflict. Your world will learn this too." Kim nodded slowly, as if he was considering something very important. "I see. Well, as I said, such decisions require discussion. We will need some time to consider your generous offer." Veltar's musical voice took on a harder tone. "How much time?" "A few days, perhaps a week. These things cannot be rushed. 1 week is acceptable. But understand, Secretary General Kim, this is not a negotiation. We are not here to bargain or make deals. We are here to inform you of your new reality. In 1 week, we expect your answer to be yes." "Of course," Kim replied. "Ambassador Park will show you to your quarters. We have prepared comfortable rooms for you and your delegation." As the aliens were led away toward the diplomatic buildings, Veltar turned to his assistant. a smaller creature with green scales instead of blue skin. Are they always this slow to understand? Veltar asked in their own language. Perhaps they are in shock, his assistant replied. It is a big change for such a primitive species. Give them time to accept their new place in the galaxy. Meanwhile, Kim waited until the aliens were out of sight before speaking to his advisors. So-Min, I want you to contact every government on Earth. Full emergency protocols. Minho, get our best scientists and military analysts. I want to know everything about these visitors by tomorrow morning. What are you thinking? Lee Minho asked. Kim looked up at the alien ship still floating in the sky above Geneva. I am thinking that in 800 years of doing this, they have never met anyone like us. Dr. Han Jiwoo had not slept in 36 hours. His eyes burned as he stared at the computer screen in the underground laboratory beneath Seoul. Around him, dozens of other scientists worked frantically, their keyboards clicking like rainfall on metal roofs. Look at this, Dr. Choi Yuna called, from across the room. She was pointing at her screen, which showed a detailed scan of the alien ships. Their hull material is impressive, maybe 50 years ahead of our best steel. But see these weapon ports? They are designed for space rocks and small accidents, not for fighting other ships. Han Ji-woo walked over to look. What do you mean? Mean their weapons are like fancy fire extinguishers. Good for putting out fires, not good for starting them. Choi Yuna pulled up another image. And look at their energy shields. They protect against radiation and space dust, but a simple missile would go right through. Across the city, in a government building with no windows, Intelligence Officer Kang Soo-jin was having a video call with officials from around the world. On her screen were faces from America, Russia, China, and dozens of other countries. We have been studying their behavior for 2 days now, Kang said, reading from her notes. Every member of their delegation comes from worlds that never had big wars. Their histories show no conflicts larger than small disagreements over trade routes. What about their technology? Asked the American representative. Surely they must have military experience to build starships. That is the strange part, Kang replied. They built everything for exploration and trade. Their ships have no armor. Their weapons are tools, not weapons of war. It is like they never learned how to fight. In the alien quarters at the Geneva Diplomatic Center, junior researcher Nixall could not stop reading the human database his team had downloaded. His tentacles shook as he scrolled through page after page of human history. The numbers made no sense to him. Humans had fought something called World War II, which killed more people than lived on most consortium worlds. They had created weapons that could destroy entire cities, then built thousands of them and pointed them at each other for decades. Most shocking of all, they had somehow used this constant threat of destruction to create the longest period of peace in their history. Nixall's sleeping partner, researcher Kexala, rolled over in their shared bed. You are reading again. Come to sleep. I cannot sleep, Nixall whispered. These humans, they are not like the other species we have integrated. Look at this. He showed her his tablet. They have a phrase called mutually assured destruction. They created a situation where attacking anyone would result in everyone dying. That sounds insane, Kexala said, though she was now awake and interested. Yes, exactly. And it worked. They stopped having big wars because they made big wars too dangerous to survive. Back in Seoul, Dr. Han Ji-woo was now looking at psychological profiles that intelligence services had put together. Captain Park, Min-sik, a military advisor, sat beside him reading the same information. Every species they have contacted before was peaceful by nature, Park said. They evolved on worlds with plenty of resources and no major predators. Fighting was rare, because there was always enough for everyone. And us? Han asked, though he already knew the answer. We evolved fighting everything. The weather, wild animals, diseases, and most of all each other. We learned to be good at fighting because the ones who were bad at it died. Han pulled up a comparison chart on his computer. Look at this. The average consortium species had maybe one major conflict per 1,000 years. We have had one major conflict every 50 years, and hundreds of smaller ones in between. Captain Park leaned back in his chair. So they think we are primitive, Because we fight so much. But we think fighting makes us strong, Han finished. 3 floors above them, President Lee Jae-sung was in an emergency meeting with his top advisors. On the table were reports from scientists, intelligence services, and military analysts. What is our conclusion? The president asked. General Yoon Tae-hyun, the head of the military, spoke first. Sir, these aliens have never fought a real war. They do not understand how war works, how armies work, or how people behave when their survival is threatened. They assume we will be reasonable, added Foreign Minister Bae Sung-min, because every other species has been reasonable when faced with superior technology. But we are not reasonable when threatened, President Lee said quietly. We are dangerous. Back in Geneva, Ambassador Veltar was becoming increasingly confused by the reports his team was giving him. The humans seemed to be taking their integration much more seriously than any previous species. Sir, his military advisor Krellick reported, we are detecting increased communication between their governments, much more than usual for such a primitive species. And their scientists appear to be studying our technology very carefully, added another aide. More carefully than species with much more advanced science. Veltar waved his 4 hands dismissively. They are curious, nothing more. Primitive species often react this way when first exposed to advanced civilization. Give them time to understand how small they are compared to us. But in his private quarters that night, Veltar found himself looking at the same human history, files that had kept Nixel awake. The more he read, the more uncomfortable he became. These humans had destroyed entire cities with single weapons. They had fought wars that lasted years and killed millions. They had created strategies for winning fights against enemies with better weapons and larger armies. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to treat the possibility of total destruction as just another factor to consider when making plans. Veltar closed the files and tried to sleep, but one thought kept repeating in his mind. What if they say no? Secretary General Kim Dae-ho chose a special place for the final negotiations. The Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum sat quietly in the morning sun, its simple concrete walls holding the memory of August 6, 1945. Ambassador Veltar stepped out of his transport vehicle and looked around with his 4 eyes. The building seemed very plain compared to the grand structures on consortium worlds. Why did you choose this place for our meeting? He asked. You will understand soon, Kim replied, walking toward the entrance. Please let us take a brief tour before we begin our talks. Inside the museum, the alien delegation moved slowly from display to display. Their translator devices worked quietly, turning Japanese and English words into their own language, but some things needed no translation. Veltar stopped in front of a photograph showing the mushroom cloud rising over the city. The caption read, August 6, 1945, 8:15 a.m., 1 bomb, 146,000 people killed. This is impossible, whispered Keksala, Veltar's science advisor. One weapon cannot kill so many people. Kim stood beside them, his hands folded behind his back. We learned to split atoms and release the energy that holds matter together. This was our first use of that knowledge in war. They moved to the next display, which showed twisted metal and melted stone. A child's tricycle sat in a glass case, its paint burned away on one side. The temperature at the center of the explosion was 4,000 degrees, Kim explained quietly. Hot enough to melt steel. The light was brighter than the sun. Nixal, the young researcher who had been studying human history, pointed at another display with a shaking tentacle. It says here you used this weapon twice. 3 days later you dropped another one. Yes, Kim said. On the city of Nagasaki, 70,000 more people died. Veltar's 4 arms crossed over his chest, a sign of distress in his species. But why? Why would you do such a thing to your own kind? We were at war, Kim replied. Our leaders believed it would end the fighting faster and save more lives in the long term. They may have been right. The war ended 6 days after Nagasaki. The aliens followed Kim through more displays showing the aftermath. Hospitals full of burn victims, children who lost their parents, families searching through rubble for missing relatives. We built a museum here so we would never forget the cost of such weapons, Kim said as they reached the end of the tour. We wanted to remember that some victories are too terrible to celebrate. They moved to a conference room overlooking the Peace Memorial Park. Through the windows, they could see the monument marking where the bomb had exploded 77 years earlier. Kim sat across from Veltar at a polished wooden table. His advisors Lee Min-ho and Park So-min sat on either side of him. The alien delegation arranged themselves according to their own customs, with Veltar in the center and his advisors forming a half-circle behind him. Now, Kim said, let us discuss your proposal. Veltar seemed eager to move away from the disturbing museum displays. Yes, let us return to business. As I explained before, your integration into the consortium follows standard procedures. You provide resources and workers. We provide guidance and technology. Kim nodded politely. We have considered your offer carefully. However, we would like to propose an alternative arrangement. Alternative? Veltar's smaller eyes blinked rapidly. There are no alternatives. There are only the standard terms. We propose that Earth join the consortium as an equal partner, Kim said calmly. We will contribute our expertise in crisis management, strategic planning, and defensive operations. In return, we ask for full membership rights and access to consortium technology. The aliens looked at each other with expressions that might have been confusion or amusement. Veltar made a sound that the translator rendered as laughter. You offer military service? Your weapons are primitive compared to ours. What could you possibly contribute to species who have traveled between stars for centuries? Kim signaled to Park So-min, who activated a holographic projector in the center of the table. Images began appearing in the air above them. The first image showed soldiers fighting in deep snow and ruined buildings. The Battle of Stalingrad, Kim said. 1,100,000 casualties. We fought for control of a single city for 5 months. The next image showed ships burning on dark water. The Battle of Leyte Gulf, 700 ships, 200,000 sailors. The largest naval battle in human history. More images followed. Normandy Beach covered with landing craft. The trenches of the Somme. Tank battles across North African deserts. In this single battle, Kim pointed to an image of Gettysburg. We lost more soldiers in 3 days than most consortium worlds have lost in their entire history. Veltar leaned forward, his 4 hands gripping the edge of the table. These are just barbaric slaughters. This proves you need our guidance, not that you can help us. Perhaps, Kim agreed. But consider this. Each of these battles taught us something new about logistics, communication, and organization under impossible conditions. We study our failures and learn from them. Lee Min-ho opened a thick folder and began reading. Our military academies still analyze battles. From 2,000 years ago, we have detailed studies of how to supply armies across vast distances, how to coordinate attacks involving millions of people, and how to maintain discipline when everything is going wrong. Violence is not the answer to every problem, Veltar said, though his voice was less certain than before. Kim smiled the same diplomatic smile he had used during their first meeting. You are absolutely right. Violence is rarely the answer. But when it is the answer, Ambassador Veltar, we are very, very good at it. The room fell silent except for the quiet humming of the translator devices. Outside the window, visitors to the Peace Memorial walked quietly among the monuments, remembering the day when humans had briefly touched the power of stars. The alien ships moved into position just as the sun was rising over Earth. 3 massive vessels, each one longer than 10 city blocks, floated silently above Seoul, London, and New York. Their hulls gleamed silver in the morning light, casting strange shadows on the streets below. In the Seoul government bunker, General Yoon Tae-hyun watched the energy readings on his screens climb higher and higher. Red warning lights flashed across the control room as his technicians called out measurements. Energy buildup in all 3 ships, reported Lieutenant Kim Soo-jin from her station. Whatever they are charging, it is big. Dr. Han Ji-woo ran into the control room carrying a tablet full of calculations. General, based on the energy patterns, these are pacification weapons. They will not kill people, but they will knock everyone unconscious for several hours. General Yoon picked up the red phone that connected him directly to President Lee Jae-sung. Sir, they are about to fire on civilian populations. Seoul, London, and New York will be hit simultaneously. How many people? The president asked. Approximately 15 million, sir. Above the three cities, the alien weapons finished charging. Veltar stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at Seoul through the main viewing screen. His four hands were clasped behind his back in a gesture of authority. Fire the pacification beams, he ordered. 3 streams of golden energy shot down from the alien ships. They moved like slow lightning, spreading out as they reached the atmosphere. The beams covered entire city districts, passing through buildings and vehicles as if they were made of glass. In Seoul, people collapsed on sidewalks and in their cars. Office workers fell asleep at their desks. Children playing in parks simply lay down where they stood. The beams were painless and gentle, designed to incapacitate without causing harm. The same scene played out in London and New York. Millions of people fell into deep, dreamless sleep as the alien weapons did their work. Veltar activated the communication system that would broadcast his message to every government on Earth. People of Earth, you have now seen a small demonstration of our capabilities. Your major cities have been pacified using non-lethal methods. No one has been permanently harmed, but they will sleep for the next 6 hours. His voice reached the bunkers and command centers where Earth's leaders waited. This is your final warning. Surrender now and accept integration into the consortium, or we will be forced to use more serious measures. You have 1 hour to respond. In the Seoul bunker, President Lee Jae-sung sat in his command chair surrounded by his top advisors. The screens around him showed the sleeping cities, with only a few people moving among the unconscious millions. They harmed our people, the president said quietly. His voice was calm, but everyone in the room could hear the anger underneath. General, Yoon leaned forward. Sir, they think this was a demonstration of mercy. They do not understand what they have just done. No, the president agreed. They do not understand us at all. He picked up a different phone, one that connected to a very secret facility hidden in the mountains. Admiral Song, this is the president. Authorization code, Thunder and Lightning. 200 miles above Earth's surface, objects that had been floating silently in space for 15 years suddenly came to life. They had looked like pieces of space junk. Old satellites, broken rocket parts, chunks of metal left over from construction projects. But now they revealed their true nature. Admiral Song Hyun-woo sat in the orbital command center watching as 17 kinetic bombardment platforms powered up their systems. Each platform carried tungsten rods the size of telephone poles, designed to be dropped from orbit at incredible speeds. Targets acquired, reported his weapons officer. 3 alien vessels in low atmospheric orbit. Time to show them what happens. When you hurt our people, Admiral Song said. Fire. The tungsten rods launched from their platforms like bullets fired from a gun, but these bullets were traveling at 25,000 miles per hour, and each one carried the destructive power of a small nuclear weapon. The first rod hit Veltar's flagship above Seoul. The alien ship's shields, designed to deflect space, dust and radiation, offered no protection against a solid metal projectile moving at such speed. The rod punched through the hull like it was made of paper and exploded inside the ship's power core. The flagship vanished in a ball of white-hot plasma that lit up the morning sky brighter than the sun. The shockwave shattered windows for miles around, and people who had been unconscious began waking up from the sound. The ships above London and New York suffered the same fate. 3 more tungsten rods, 3 more explosions, 3 more alien vessels turned into expanding clouds of superheated gas. The remaining 14 ships in the alien fleet pulled back to a safe distance as Admiral Song's voice reached them on all communication frequencies. Attention consortium vessels. You have attacked civilian populations on Earth. This was a mistake. You now have 24 hours to withdraw beyond lunar orbit. Any ship that remains will be considered hostile and will be destroyed. Veltar, who had been thrown across his bridge by the explosion, struggled to his feet. Emergency lights flashed red around him, and alarms wailed in his species' musical language. "Status report," he shouted to his surviving crew. "3 ships destroyed, sir." His tactical officer Krellick reported, his voice shaking. "No survivors. The humans used kinetic weapons we never detected." "How many more do they have?" Krellick checked his sensors, and his 4 eyes widened in terror. "Sir, we are reading 14 more platforms coming online. They have weaponized their entire orbital space." Feltar stared at the tactical display showing the debris fields where his ships had been just moments before. "But they are primitive. They barely achieve spaceflight." His science advisor, Nixal, bleeding from a cut on his forehead, whispered, the words that changed everything. "Sir, I do not think they are primitive. I think they have been preparing for this their entire history." 6 months after the orbital bombardment, Ambassador Veltar sat in a very different kind of meeting room. This time he was aboard his own flagship, but the humans sat across from him as equals, not as conquered subjects. The conference table was round with no head or foot, and the lighting was soft and warm instead of the harsh white he preferred. Secretary General Kim Dae-ho looked exactly as calm as he had during their first meeting in Geneva. Beside him sat Foreign Minister Bae Sung-min, a woman with sharp eyes who had spent the last months learning to speak the consortium's trade language. General Yoon Tae-hyun sat quietly at the end, saying nothing but making his presence felt. "We have prepared a new agreement," Kim said, sliding a data tablet across the table. "We believe it addresses both of our needs." Veltar picked up the tablet with 2 of his 4 hands. His other 2 hands trembled slightly as he read. The document was nothing like the standard integration protocols his people had used for 800 years. "Earth offers the consortium full partnership in defensive operations," he read aloud. "Humans will provide strategic consultation, crisis management expertise, and military support when requested. In exchange, Earth receives full membership status, technology sharing agreements, and representation in consortium governance. The term we prefer is Special Security Partner," Bae Sung-min explained. "It acknowledges that we bring different skills to the relationship." Veltar's science advisor, Nixal, leaned forward nervously. "What exactly do you mean by crisis management expertise?" General Yoon spoke for the first time during the meeting. "We mean we know how to solve problems that diplomacy cannot solve. When talking fails, when negotiation breaks down, when someone threatens the peace you have built, you call us." "And if we call you?" Veltar asked quietly. "What happens then?" Kim's diplomatic smile never changed, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "We solve the problem, permanently." The negotiations took 3 days. Other consortium species, participating through video links from their homeworlds, objected strongly to giving humans equal status. The delegate from Zerion Prime was particularly vocal. "They are a violent, primitive species," the Zerion representative argued, his triangular head wobbling with indignation. "They solve problems by destroying things. This is not civilized behavior." Captain Park Min-sik, who had been quietly taking notes, looked up from his papers. "May I ask, Representative Koltar, how long did it take your people to resolve the mining dispute on Zerion 7? That took 4 years of careful negotiation," Koltar replied. "And how many people died during those 4 years while production stopped and supplies ran short?" "Well, approximately 12,000. But that was unavoidable civilian hardship, not violence." Park nodded and made another note. "I see. And if you had asked us for help, we would have resolved it in 6 weeks with 0 civilian casualties." "How?" Koltar demanded. "By explaining to both sides exactly what would happen if they did not reach an agreement immediately," Park replied, calmly. "Sometimes the threat of controlled violence prevents much larger amounts of uncontrolled suffering. The agreement was signed on a Tuesday morning. Earth became the first species in consortium history to join as an equal partner rather than an integrated subject. The ceremony was held on Earth, in the same room where the aliens had first delivered their ultimatum. But the real test came 8 months later, when separatist factions in the Andorian system declared independence from the consortium and began attacking trade routes. 3 star systems were on the verge of economic collapse as ships stopped traveling through the region. The consortium tried their usual methods first. They sent diplomats who talked for weeks without results. They offered economic incentives that the separatists ignored. They threatened trade sanctions that only made the attacks worse. Finally, Veltar made a call he had never thought he would make. "Secretary General Kim, we need your help." Captain Park Min-sik arrived in the Andorian system 3 weeks later aboard a small Earth vessel. He brought no weapons, no soldiers, and no threats. Instead, he brought a tablet computer and a very detailed presentation. The separatist leaders agreed to meet with him because they were curious about the species that had made the mighty consortium ask for help. They expected to see a warrior or a general. Instead, they met a quiet man in a simple uniform who spoke softly and smiled often. "Gentlemen," Park said, setting up his holographic projector, "let me show you some examples of what happens to people who attack civilian trade routes." For the next 2 hours, he showed them Earth's history of dealing with pirates, raiders, and anyone else who threatened peaceful commerce. He showed them what had happened to the Barbary pirates, to the various raiders who had attacked shipping lanes, and to every group that had ever thought they could profit from other people's fear. "The pattern is always the same," Park explained as images of burning ships and captured pirates filled the air. "First, trade stops. Then the merchants ask their governments for protection. Then the governments send people like me to solve the problem." He turned off the projector and sat back in his chair. "Now you can choose to negotiate an end to this situation, or you can choose to become another example for the next group that thinks piracy is profitable. Either way, trade will resume. The only question is whether you will be alive to see it." The separatists surrendered 6 days later. The consortium's official report noted that no shots were fired and no lives were lost. It did not mention that the separatist leaders had spent those 6 days reading every piece of human military history they could find. 2 years after the first contact, the joint colony ship Harmony launched toward the Kepler system. Commander Lee So-young worked alongside consortium engineers and scientists, while human security specialists trained alien crew members in what they called Earth protocols. The new procedures were simple. Always negotiate in good faith, always offer reasonable compromises, and always remember that some problems have only one solution. The consortium quietly updated their first contact guidelines. Species were now classified into several categories, with a new addition: Death World diplomats. Approach with extreme caution. Never issue ultimatums. Always negotiate as equals. In his final report on the Earth integration, Veltar wrote, "Humans do not fight because they enjoy violence. They fight because they understand that peace is only possible when everyone knows the price of war. They have made themselves so dangerous that others choose to be reasonable." Earth had taught the galaxy something new. You do not demand from those who have turned survival into an art form. You ask politely, you negotiate fairly, and you hope they like you enough to protect you instead of replacing you.